was like, there are so many things happening. There are so many names. I don't even know what's going on, but I'm just gonna go with it. Okay everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maddie. If you're new here, if you're not here, if you're not new here, hello, welcome back. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in May and June. Basically, the background is I'm trying to read 50 books this year. I don't know how often I mention that, but I am trying to read 50 books this year. May and June were a little bit slow for me, and I wasn't really posting in those months because there was just like a lot happening, and I just felt like I didn't really want to come in and be like, well, here are the books I'm reading, because obviously the books that I've been reading in July have changed a lot. They've definitely shifted, not changed a lot, but I'm just trying to focus a lot more on Black authors, and I think you should be focusing on that also. So the books that I read in May and June are a little bit different, but I still wanted to talk about them. So without further ado, let's jump right in. And I have my little notes here. Okay, there's a hair. Okay, so the first book that I finished in May was called With Malice by Eileen Cook. So I gave With Malice 2 stars. When I was reading this for like a book club, and I actually chose it because I saw someone talk about it, and they talked about how it was just like a fun kind of like thriller, and I was like, oh my, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I texted my friend when I finished it, and I was like, I kind of hated it. I didn't hate it, but I really just like did not connect with it at all. So basically the story is it follows 18-year-old Jill. She wakes up in the hospital, she doesn't remember anything, and basically she's told that there was an accident that happened in Italy while she was like on a school trip, and they basically think that she tried to kill her friend. So it obviously is very reminiscent of kind of the Amanda Knox case. I mean, like just a little bit, but that same kind of feeling of like American girl goes to Italy, the friend is killed, and I think the author probably took some inspiration from that. I'm not really sure, but it was just, and the entire plot takes place in the hospital, and it's Jill trying to put things together and figure out what happened, and she's like, oh, there's no way I could have done this. And okay, so basically you're flashing between Jill in the hospital and these like blog posts and text messages, so you're kind of trying to figure out the plot. But I would have rather had flashbacks like in the actual narrative. I would have liked to actually seen the characters in Italy. I thought that's what we were gonna get, but you actually don't ever get those scenes. You just get Jill like talking about them. So I don't know, and there's all this build up toward the end, and it just kind of falls flat. I don't know, I just found it very, and the way Jill and her best friend Simone talk to each other is very like preteen, like LOL. I don't know, it just was so, I don't have the word to describe it, but I just didn't really like it at all. So moving on. This next book, and this is why I think I didn't read as many books in May, is because the next book I read is Dune by Frank Herbert. That's a long book. It was like a hefty read, and if you don't know about Dune, so basically, okay, Dune is kind of, I would say, the precursor to so much of our modern kind of sci-fi. I think you can really see a lot of strains that go through like Star Wars and other things like that. Like I think a lot of kind of more modern people working in fantasy and science fiction took inspiration from the Dune books. I think there's quite a few of them. My friend Taylor was basically the reason why I wanted to read it. I also wanted to read it because they're making the movie. The movie is coming out in the fall, and it has like Timothée Chalamet, what's his name? Josh Brolin, Jason Momoa. It's like an all-star cast, and it's Denis Villeneuve. I don't know how to say his name, but he's the director who did like Arrival. So I think it's gonna be really good. So I wanted to read the book before I saw the movie. My friend Taylor recommended it to me. It's like her favorite books. So So a little bit about the books, if you don't know. So Dune is set in the future. It tells the story of the Atreides family. I hope I'm saying that right. That's how I've been saying it in my mind. But so basically this family, and there's kind of dueling families between the Atreides and the Harkonnens. And basically the Atreides come to Arrakis, which is Dune, the planet, and they're coming to like be the caretakers, or they're like coming in to be like the ruling family on Arrakis. So Arrakis grows this spice called melange, I guess you would say. And it's basically this spice that it's only grown on this planet, and you can use it for like a lot of different things. And it like gives you almost like psychological powers. I don't know, it's hard to explain. Like, this book is so complex and it has so many different layers. It's kind of hard for me to even describe it in one sitting, but that's basically the premise of the book. So they're coming over, obviously, you know, tension ensues, and Timothée Chalamet is going to play Paul Atreides, the son of the Duke, and I think that is actually a really good casting, so I'm excited to see it. So kind of like I said, this book is like very complex, you know, like it dives into like, I literally wrote a list. It goes into like politics, religion, ecology, technology, human emotion. Like, there's so many different layers. I mean, and I texted my friend Taylor when I first started reading it, and I was like, there are so many things happening. There are so many names. I don't even know what's going on, but I'm just gonna go with it. And Taylor was like, yes, like don't try to remember everything, just read the book. Because she was like, everything will become clear soon. So I just kind of read it like that. Something that I did want to kind of address is a lot of people kind of view Dune as kind of a white savior novel, because basically when they get to Arrakis, it's inhabited by, I say Fremen, but I guess it's Fremen. It's Fremen. Basically these like native people to the planet, and they do have a lot of characteristics. I mean, obviously the planet Dune, I mean, it's like sandy, there's dunes of sand. Obviously you could kind of view that as kind of like a Middle Eastern culture or a Middle Eastern country, and some of the cultural characteristics of the Fremen seem to be kind of like Middle Eastern. I don't know, so I think you can kind of view the Fremen people, I think they are supposed to be kind of like an Arabic culture, or I don't know, because they talk about, like, there's a couple lines in the book where they say, oh, it was Ramadan, it was this. So it's kind of interesting, but they aren't a helpless people. They're very powerful in their own right. I came into the book thinking that I was gonna be really like shocked and offended, and I was gonna be really, I don't know, I felt like it was gonna be more like straightforward, and I was gonna be more kind of feeling some type of way about it. But I don't know, I think that's definitely something that people need to address and kind of think about that when they're reading the book, and kind of what does that mean. It's also kind of like Paul is almost kind of a messiah character. I don't know, I feel like this is a book that I need to, like, you almost need to read it again to really get everything out of it that you need to get out of it. I do want to read the next book. It kind of ends on a cliffhanger, and I'm still intrigued to know like what happens to the characters next. But I gave Dune 4 stars. I mean, it is a really interesting story. I don't know, but I really like the female character, Lady Jessica. She's also extremely powerful, and I think is a big player in these books. But ultimately, I think it is worth a read. I think you can also read something and enjoy it, but also but think about the themes that you need to think about, and be suspicious of kind of white savior themes. But it wasn't as obvious, and it wasn't as straightforward, cut and dry as I think it was. So that's something I also would be interested if anyone has any thoughts about. If you have any feedback, you know, feel free to comment. Let me know what you think of Dune. Do you think it's a straightforward white savior story? Do you like these books? Because I enjoyed it, and I love science fiction, so I think I will probably read the next ones, and I am really excited to see the movie as well. Let me take a drink of my coffee. Okay, so the next book I read, this was also for a book club. I read The Nightingale by Kristin. So this is a book that I have heard a lot about. I think a lot of people have read it. She also read another book called The Great Alone that a lot of people I think really love. So I'm kind of interested in that one as well. But so yeah, The Nightingale. I gave this one 4 stars. I like really enjoyed it. I thought it was really intriguing. So basically this is World War II France. You're following 2 sisters, Isabelle and Vienne. And it's basically kind of when the war starts, Vienne's husband goes off to war. Isabelle is a little bit younger. She's kind of a wayward soul, we would say. They kind of have like a bad past, the 2 sisters, with each other. Their mother passed away. Their father is very like traumatized from World War I. So basically after the Nazis occupy France, it kind of splits the 2 sisters between kind of a more active resistance and a more like passive resistance. Not a passive resistance, I think that's kind of an oxymoron, but it's kind of the 2 sisters deal with the occupation in a different way. So Isabelle is more directly like fighting, well, I don't know if I want to say anything. I don't want to give away any spoilers. But I think the reason why this story was so interesting, which I mean, it was just like an interesting story to begin with. I read this book like right before the kind of, you can't really say the Black Lives Matter movement started because it's been going on for years, but before all of this like heightened interest. And it really makes you think about like, what would you do? You know, like if these people came into your country and were walking down the street and were coming into your home, like what would you do? How would you resist? And I think there really is a big lesson to be learned about how not everyone's gonna go about it the same way, and you can't like force people to protest, like you can't force people to react in the same way as you, but ultimately I think that you do kind of come to the realization of like what, like would you do what's right, you know? So I think that was something that really was interesting, and it seemed really timely that it kind of had these themes right before this larger awakening, social awakening started happening. Some of the criticism of the book is that it's not super historically accurate. Like even some reviews I read were like, well it wasn't snowing in you know, that part of France in 1945. And like I get, and I guess there are some other historical inaccuracies in the book. Like I don't think it happened exactly like this, you know. But I think ultimately what this book does is it makes you, first of all, think about what you would do in the face of injustice. Secondly, it makes you think about people that are left behind during wartime, like the women that are left behind and kind of what they have to deal with, and what men are going to come home to, what they're like. So I think ultimately it really made me think. Also, I hated Isabelle's like love story. I thought it was so pointless, and it just made me feel like she's already an interesting enough character. Like she doesn't have to have like a love story or a love interest. And also there's so much focus on like her being beautiful, her beauty, like this and that. And I was like, once again, irrelevant. You know, she's kind of doing all these amazing things in the book, and you know, ultimately, aside from my like small critiques, I really liked it. Everyone in my book club like loved it. And I also think this is kind of like, it was like the deepest discussion that we've had in our book club so far. So I think that's really cool. Okay, so the next book I read, I believe we are getting into, I only read 2 books in May, which is not good for my 50 book goal. And then I read, I think I read 3 books in May, or maybe I read 2 books in May and 3 books in June. Still, not good for my 50 book goal. Like I really need to like pick up the pace if I'm gonna make it. Okay, so the next book I read, this was also a recommendation from a friend, and it was Frankenstein in Baghdad by Ahmed Saadawi. He is an Iraqi author, And I really want to start reading some more Arabic authors. I think this is I'm trying to think. I think this is the first book. I can't even remember if I've ever read any short stories by Arabic authors. But the book, Frankenstein in Baghdad. So the reason why I was interested in this book is because Frankenstein is actually one of my favorite books by Mary Shelley, of course. I thought that it was so interesting and I loved the themes. The first time I read it in high school, I had an amazing English teacher who just made the discussion about the books so good, and so good, and she really made us think deeply about the themes, and I think that's why I love it so much. But so I talked to my friend about that, and she recommended this book. This book takes place in U.S. occupied Baghdad. So this is post-invasion, which I think is also very interesting because I so rarely get that perspective of the other side. I feel like Americans, we view ourselves as always like the good guys, the heroes, and we never really hear it from the other perspective of what it was like for people in the country when we invaded their countries. So that's something I really liked reading about. But so basically the premise is Hadi, he's like a scavenger, and he basically gets all these body parts and sews them together because he wants like officials or what's the word I use? Like the authorities. He wanted authorities to recognize this person, these body parts as a person, and have a proper memorial and burial for them, which I think is really interesting. But so basically, I think in comparison to the original Frankenstein, it's interesting because there's not really there's not as much discussion or themes from like the actual creation. It's pretty like swift. It's kind of like all of a sudden they call it the what's its name in this book. Like it's there. And so that's kind of like the only thing they really say about it is kind of like that's basically the only part of like the origin stories. They tell you why he put the body parts together. Obviously Hadi comes back, the body is gone, and basically the what's its name, its body starts deteriorating, so it'll get body parts from other people, and he starts by getting body parts from like guilty people. He kills guilty people and he gets their body parts, but then it kind of starts becoming a little murky as to like guilt, innocence, and I think that's one of the biggest themes in the book is kind of that blurred line between guilt and innocent, and in wartime, kind of this like chaos, and like how can you tell the difference between evil and good and things like that. So that's it. It really was an interesting premise. I think it's something that makes you think a lot. But I gave this book 4 stars. I think most of the reviews are like 3 or 4 stars. I liked it. I thought it was super interesting, thought-provoking. I would definitely recommend it. And if you have any other books by Arabic authors that you want to recommend, please let me know. Okay, so the final book that I read in June was The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This was a book that we decided to read in our book club because we were like, we really should make an effort to read some more books by like Black authors, by people of color, by Indigenous authors. So we decided to start with The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This is a book that has been on my radar for quite some time. I've wanted to read it for so long, and finally the opportunity, I've had the opportunity so many times, which I think is, there's also someone just sitting outside my window. Okay, no, the music's down. But people come and drive their car and park it outside our window and just like blare music, and I'm just like, what are you doing? And I don't want to be like the Scrooge that comes out there and is like, hi, like, can you turn your music down? Anyways, okay, back to the book. Okay, so The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. So this book was actually the winner of the Pulitzer and the National Book Award. Very exciting stuff. And basically the story follows Cora, who is an enslaved person on a plantation in Georgia. And it kind of follows her story as she crosses kind of the southern states looking for freedom. She runs away. She's run away. Obviously, the Underground Railroad is the title of the book. But something that really interested me was Colson Whitehead decided to portray the railroad as a physical railroad. So you actually see Cora try to escape. You try to see her escape like literally in tunnels in a railroad. And basically he said a couple interesting things. He said in an interview that it took him like 16 years to write this book. He thought of the idea originally in 2000. And I think he said as a child, he said when you learn about the Underground Railroad, you think of it as a physical railroad. So that's kind of why he decided to run with that idea. And I mean, it's extremely well written. Obviously, I don't think anyone needs reminding, but it just really portrays like the horrors of slavery. And it also just really makes you think a lot more about heroes like Harriet Tubman. There's so much noise outside my window. I'm gonna go shut it. Okay, sorry. Oh, so heroes. Yeah, so I think it makes you think a lot more about heroes like Harriet Tubman and people who did end up trying to flee from enslavement, because it just really makes you think, like, if these people would have gotten caught, if Harriet Tubman would have gotten caught, their punishment is like worse than death. I mean, just such atrocities to human life, and yeah, I mean, just horrible. But yeah, like I said, I gave it 4 stars. I think it's super well written. Obviously, I was like gripped. I wanted to know what happened to Cora. I was like worried for her. I like really wanted her to find her freedom. I mean, ultimately, I think May and June, I did read some good books. And I'm excited to hear if anyone has any feedback about any of these. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching me talk about books again for this long video. I am gonna try to make my July wrap up in a timely fashion. For July, I had read some really good books like The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I also hope that no one thought that like these were the books I read. It's very misleading. All the books I read these in May and June were on my Kindle, which is something I'm really like grappling with because I buy the Kindle books off of Amazon, so it's like a whole other thing. But thank you so much for watching, and if you liked it, feel free to comment, subscribe, I don't know, whatever you want to do. If you have any recommendations for books, let me know. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time.